Arne Slot is well embedded now as Liverpool manager, but I spoke to Paul Gorst of the Liverpool Echo to compare him from a journalistic perspective to former Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp. What is he good at? What is he bad at? What are the differences? What are the similarities? Enjoy. People are still talking about it's City and Arsenal. Liverpool are still weirdly kind of not totally flying under the radar, but it's nice that we're able to operate without the same level of scrutiny. I think that those two teams are getting.
Yeah, 100%, and I think that's been to Liverpool's advantage this season. Just sort of not really being the headline news. All the talk for best part of 6 months was Klopp's farewell tour and all that sort of stuff that got wrapped up around it. Now Arne Slot's come in, quietly gone about the business, changed one or two things without a major overhaul of the playing squad and getting results. It was interesting. I was listening to the Overlaps European episode this morning, and I think they only spoke to Gareth Roberts, who was Liverpool's representative, for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then the rest of it was Chelsea, it was Arsenal, it was United. Liverpool just quietly going under the radar, which from a mainstream perspective, I think sort of suits them.
If you don't mind, I just want to ask you about Slot, because I haven't really been in his presence yet. We walked past me once in Philadelphia, and that's about as close as I've got so far. But you're in the press conferences, or you're in and around the grounds. It's not like you're in the manager's pocket per se. But I've noticed that I'm quite enjoying his press conferences, because I think he says more than Jurgen did. I don't think he's quite as it's not quite as bouncy and as super energetic, but I'm enjoying how he's conducted himself. He is funny. He's not being totally dry and characterless. What have you noticed any particular differences in that sort of sphere from the journal perspective?
Yeah, I think he's growing into the role from a media perspective. There was a lot of times when I'd be going back to our office on a Friday, and my boss would say, what's the line for tomorrow? And you'd say, don't know yet. I'm going to have to sift through it and try and see if there is something in there, just because he didn't give loads away. And, if you ask him about the contract situation, he plays the straight bat and I'm only the head coach, so it's not my business. But slowly but surely, he is warming up in that sense. And it's more sort of what you can glean from his answers as opposed to what he's actually saying. Like, on Monday, he got asked about how long can Mohamed Salah play at this level, and he sort of likened them to Messi and Ronaldo, and that leads you to suggest that he thinks Mo Salah is good enough to carry on at this level for years, so why wouldn't it be at Liverpool? Just all these sorts of things. He's not someone who's going to give you booming sort of 2-3 minute answers in the way Jurgen would. But like I said just then, he's his own man, and he's growing into the role. And when results go your way, it just helps massively, doesn't it, with everything like that? So, I was thinking about it this morning. I think Liverpool fans have got every right to be massively enthused about the short, the medium and the long term on the Slot.
What I like about how he conducts himself, again, you're right, I think he's warming into the whole thing, but he actually gives. You see what I used to enjoy Pep Lijnders' press conferences, because I think it was just really insightful. He was happy to discuss things, but then there were often times where you go, is he maybe saying a bit too much here? Slot doesn't talk. I mean, his pre and his post-match press conference is completely different. He's right. He shuts down transfer rumours really eloquently. I mean, Jurgen was very good at doing that as well. We don't have these conversations in this space. Yeah. This is not the forum for that. So ask away, but I'm not going to give you the answers you're looking for. But I know you've got to ask the questions, so we'll have a bit of a joke of it, and we'll move on. There's a game to be played pre-match, but post-match, he literally goes about telling you how he's just beaten the team. It's a real breath of fresh air for me. I noticed as well, Xabi Alonso does a very similar thing in his post-match press conference. He talks about the tactics of how he achieved it, which is really, there's so many managers who don't think about it and therefore can't talk about it, whereas you can see how much he knows by how much he expresses.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sort of big point that you've made there was at United, wasn't it? More than any other, when Liverpool go to Old Trafford to beat them 3-0, and then Slot starts talking about how he did it, pressing from the front. We targeted down the left, whatever it was. It was a good sort of 2-3 minute answer. Brendan Rodgers used to do something similar. Jurgen, not so much. Lijnders was the one who did that. But he does. He's expansive on certain subjects, and then on other topics such as the contract situation and injuries is the big one for me. I've found, you'll ask him about Federico Chiesa or Diogo Jota, Alisson, whatever it may be. And he sort of doesn't give too much away on that front, which leaves you sort of none the wiser, really.
Do you think he's been warned about that? Because I think there was a couple of times where Jurgen probably made a rod for his own back. I mean, there was famously last season where he said that he talked about seeing Bajcetic in the canteen and going, "Oh, why the hell's this lad not playing?" And I remember him saying, like, I think it was like Oxlade-Chamberlain a couple of times. He was like, "Oh, yeah, he's ready." And then he clearly was. He was months away from being ready. So he almost talked players' fitness up a bit too much, whereas he's being a bit more guarded and possibly, sensibly so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it's a Dutch thing. I think there's sort of this idea of, patient confidentiality, which maybe doesn't extend to sporting injuries for sportsmen, but it's along those lines where he sort of, I can't really say too much because that is in place. So we're still not really sure when Diogo Jota might come back, for instance, even though he gets injured in an impact injury against Chelsea a couple of weeks ago and plays on and comes off, which initially didn't look too serious, and now you're looking at it thinking it's going to be best part of a month when he comes back. So yeah, I think on the injuries front he's very guarded. Tactically, I think that's where he sort of comes alive when he's detailing certain plans and strategies for games. But yeah, it's been an adjustment just because of how sort of big a personality Jurgen was. But Slot is he's got the body of work behind him now. I think it was 15, 16 games to suggest that he knows how to go about the pitfalls and making the right steps and really sort of getting himself across now as a really fondly thought of manager.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we were chatting at the top of the show about how this, the stuff Slot's doing, how he's holding himself, like the funny photos of him posing, and if Brendan Rodgers would have been laughed at for doing those things. And, I always felt like Brendan was so, it was like he was seeking approval in a lot of the stuff that he did. So if he wanted to tell you about tactics because he wanted you to understand that he understood. Whereas I think one thing I noticed, and just to bring it to the Leverkusen game, Slot comes out at the end of the game and he's asked about the selection in Luis Diaz, and he's happy to tell you why he's done that.
Yeah.
He talks about Jonathan Tah. He's a big fella, so he eats target men up. So he wanted to put someone in there who could get about him, and then actually detailed that, and talked about his attacking strategy, which is just, again, it's enlightening. And I don't know whether that's, it feels to me, because he's much more central to that, it does feel like, and his coaches I'm sure will play a role, and I'm sure he would be first to heap praise upon the guys he's got around him. But it does feel like the overall tactical plan is coming from Arne Slot, which I'm not sure that was always the case. It feels like Pep Lijnders was the guy setting it and Jurgen was enacting it. Yeah,
I mean, Pep Lijnders certainly grew an influence over the years, didn't he, at Liverpool? But, I mean, why wouldn't you sort of detail your tactics when you put your left winger up front and he gets Atrich? It's the maddest touch, isn't it, from a coaching point of view? So, yeah, I mean, I was, just talking about that particular decision, I was scratching my head a bit after an hour thinking, this hasn't really worked. Diaz is huffing and puffing, but I think maybe they need Cody Gakpo there or bring on Darwin Núñez, the more recognised number 9. And then he goes and slots Atrich in the final half hour and Slot looks like a genius. So these are sort of the decisions you live and die by as a manager, aren't they? And he's just getting more right than wrong at the moment. There's not a lot of things that he's doing where you think, not sure about that one, that hasn't really worked, because everything that he's doing, even sort of playing Tsimikas more than Robertson at the moment, even that's coming off. So, yeah, been quite the honeymoon period for him, hasn't it?
And just your, I guess, overall sense before we move on from Slot and sort of Klopp comparisons or whatever. What's your overall feeling being in the, being in and around as a journalist? How do you feel the relationship is between the press pack and the manager?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's much different than the one we had with Klopp. We obviously speak to him on a Friday in the open press conference, and then a few of us privileged enough to get 5 or 10 minutes with him, sort of in a little separate room. And
is that was something that, did that go away for a while?
No, that's always been there, but during COVID, they just turned the cameras off. So other publications were getting the 10:30s at the same time, the Nationals and the Echo were, but that's changed now. That's gone back to the way it has always been, really, and that was Klopp's final season. I think that came back. So yeah, it's just a continuation of that. We get, maybe 8 to 10 minutes. And what I would say is, when you have to ask maybe a difficult question or a little bit of a technical question, Slot's maybe less intimidating than Jurgen was, because, not a lot gets under his skin, Slot, so far, whereas, you had to tread carefully with Klopp or you were getting a hairdryer treatment.
Yeah, it's cool to know. Yeah, I was interested in the dynamic in that regard.